So the next step in our discussion of populations is to look at competition. Now, you guys know that organisms compete for various resources to survive. So, the way a species is distributed in an environment is dependent upon three factors. And these three factors we're going to look at individually and talk about. All right, so the distribution of a species is dependent on three factors. All right. So the first one is what we call a fundamental niche. Okay? A fundamental niche. You know, there's a saying, niches get stitches. Ha 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 ha. Y'all are probably rolling your eyes at me. It's okay. The second one is its ability to disperse. So basically, how is it getting around in an ecosystem? And then 3, we have the interaction between the species. Now, when these species interact, it's going to be in one of 3 ways. And you guys have heard of all of these. All right, so competition. That's what we're talking about right now. They will interact through competition. They will interact through predation. You guys have already done a lab over this. And they will interact through symbiosis. Now, you may not remember the word symbiosis, but you remember the concept from freshman biology. And this is where we have our mutualism, parasitism, and commensalism. Okay, so let's look at competition first. All right, now we know that competition can occur between the same species or between different species. Okay, so over here. So it can be between same species or different species. Okay, especially if you have, let's say a savanna. There's a limited amount of water. There's a limited amount of food in that location. So you have multiple different types of animals that are going to be competing for those resources. Okay, so let's talk about this example right here. Now, I know this is not a very exciting example. These are types of paramecium, so these are single-celled animals, but they still compete. Okay, so we have the P. aurelia when it is grown by itself. Look how great it does. And then the P. caudatum when it is grown by itself. Look how well it does. Now, when we decide to lump these two together, let's grow them together. What happens? Obviously, the P. aurelia is outcompeting the P. caudatum. The P. caudatum isn't able to compete, and so it starts to die off. Okay? So when they are grown separately, they thrive. But when they're grown together, the P. aurelia is a much better competitor. Okay? So we say there is a struggle for a limiting resource. So a limiting resource is going to be things like water, food, etc. Okay? So in this example, our P. aurelia is able to compete for a food source way better than the caudatum, and so it basically doesn't have enough energy to reproduce and it dies off. Okay? Now, also in competition, one species has a negative effect on the other one? All right, obviously, our blue guy right here is having a negative effect on our yellow guy. Okay, so that is competition. Now, wouldn't it be great if animals could figure out a way to reduce competition? Well, fortunately, some birds have actually done that. So these are different types of warblers, which is a kind of bird. Okay, so this is an example of how organisms have figured out how to reduce competition. Okay, now, they did not get together and have a bird meeting, and the head of each bird family met and they discussed what to do. This happened through small behavioral changes over hundreds of years. So this is behavioral evolution. Okay, so they use a process called resource partitioning. Okay, resource partitioning. And if you look at the picture, it's showing you exactly what they do. So, for example, the Blackburnian warbler, in this yellow shaded area, that is where it will look for its food source. Right here, the black-throated green warbler, it will look for its food source right here, the Cape May at the top. And you guys can see how each one of these birds has established a specific location in these trees where it is getting its food source. That is resource partitioning. Okay, so it's using a resource in different ways, places, or times. Using a resource in different places or times. Now, what you might be thinking, hopefully you are, is, hey, some of these areas overlap. Like this overlaps, and this overlaps, and this overlaps, and this overlaps. Well, when you have overlaps like that, they will feed at different times. Okay? So one will feed in the morning, one will feed in the evening. Okay? So that is resource partitioning, which is meant to reduce competition. All right. So let's move on to our next page. Hey, look, here's our predator and prey cycles. You guys have done a lab on this already, and you have done some graph analysis. So, in our predator-prey graphs, you can see that there is a cycle. Okay? It's a cycle. So, when you have a prey population increase, you're also going to have an increase in the predator population. When the prey population decreases, the predator population decreases because there's not as much food. So the populations control each other. When one goes up, the other goes up. When one goes down, the other goes down. Okay, now, this right here is an actual data collection from Yellowstone. Okay, in Yellowstone National Park in the early 1900s, basically wolves were eliminated, and it allowed all of the prey species to basically grow uncontrollably. Okay, so this is from 1955 to 2000. All right, you can see how they are working with each other. Okay, now if you look right here, guys, look right here. I'm going to draw on top of this. What does this look like? This looks like something that we just learned. This is an S curve. All right, and look at this right here. What is that? That's our J curve. Now, we also learned what happened when a population goes above the carrying capacity. So right here, we have our die-off. Okay? So you can see how this has happened in real life. So what we're seeing right here is that term overshoot. Okay? So let's talk about the wolves of Yellowstone. So as I said, in the early 1900s, the wolves were completely eliminated because they thought there were too many wolves, so hey, let's just get rid of all the predators. Okay? So the wolves were removed. What that did is it basically caused Yellowstone, the ecosystem, to almost collapse. So the moose population, which is the prey, which we just saw in the graph above, the moose population pushed K. Ooh, what's K again? Carrying capacity. Okay, so basically when they did that, all of the trees that they ate were gone. Okay? So we can say the environment crashed. Okay? Wolves were reintroduced. And I believe it was 1995. Wolves were reintroduced in 1995. And now we see a drop in the moose population. And also what this does is it keeps the moose herds moving around so they don't stay in one place too long and eat up all of the producers in that area. Okay. Now I will say this, the wolves that are in Yellowstone, our current administration, they're allowed to be hunted again. So we'll see if we're going to have history repeated. Okay. Now let's look at keystone species. I love keystone species. So this right here is a keystone. If I took this stone out, this is going to collapse. This is holding it in place. So a keystone species have a very important role in maintaining the balance within an ecosystem. Okay, so it is a species whose activities have a significant role in the structure of the community. So it has a significant role in determining, that is not how y'all spell determining, oh man, well y'all can figure it out, determining community structure. So for example, elephants. Now a lot of people don't realize that elephants are keystone species. If elephants were removed from an environment, the savanna would collapse. Because what elephants do, you see this picture right here, he's pulling over a tree. So they do pull over and they uproot these dead or diseased trees. They create pathways. When they're creating pathways, they stir up lots of little organisms that other animals will eat. Also, there is a specific tree that grows in the savanna, only in the savanna, and the seed will not germinate unless it passes through an elephant's digestive system. So basically, the elephant has to poop out the seed in order for this tree to grow. So other examples of keystone species